Back again. So this is part B of a four-part series on building simple sentences. We're looking at both Greek and English grammar, reviewing a bit of English grammar in order to learn our Greek grammar. And by the time we finished these four parts, you should be able to understand chapters 2 and 3 and also begin to translate and even to make simple sentences in Greek and translate into English. Before I move on, just want to finish one topic that I had actually originally placed in part A, and that is pronouncing, more work on pronunciation, actually reading the first chapter of John or the first 18 verses, which I'm going to recommend that you memorize for this course. Most of you are young people who will be able to quickly put this into your minds. And if you put it into your minds and you review it over a longer period of, say, 2 or 3 months, it will usually stick with you for a long time. You may need to review it from time to time again, but it's God's word in your mind and it can seep into all of your heart that way. I have spent the better part of 50 years memorizing the 53rd chapter. Actually, it starts in chapter 52 of Isaiah in Hebrew, simply because the poetry of Isaiah is so impressive, passionate, memorable, and the longer I took, the longer it took, because of course you grow older and you don't remember as well. So if you're young, especially, we're going to encourage you to memorize those first 18 verses of this chapter. But we're going to start by just pointing out, if I could go to that particular PowerPoint, which is start point B. I think I'm sharing my screen with you now. I believe so. I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to pronounce it. I'm going to let you go to this web page, and you should see it on your homework on YouTube of John 1:18. Actually, I already have it on. Let me share. I should have dug this up beforehand. Here it is. This is the web page on YouTube. And I'm going to suggest that you go down here into the right corner of your YouTube video, in this case, John 1 and the Greek New Testament, read out loud, and change the playback speed to 0.5. Now, this is an American reader, unfortunately, who reads this, this Bible text to us in Greek, and reads rather quickly, but also sometimes a little indistinctly. So slowing it down is very helpful in understanding what he's saying. I would recommend that you take the Greek text of John 1 to 18, and if you have a Greek New Testament, or you can actually get the first chapter by downloading an app like eSword. Sorry, I had to look and see what it was. eSword, or on an Android phone. I think it's called slightly something else, has to do with sword. But either way, you will find, if you download that, there are different Bibles. You can download the King James Version and the ESV are the one I use the ESV quite often. It's easy to move around in eSword on my laptop from easier than almost any other program from one verse to another. But it also has the Greek New Testament. Now it has an old text, the one that the King James Version is based on. And in the meantime, we've worked on the Greek text, discovered many, many more manuscripts. So your Greek New Testament will not be quite the same as this one. But for John 1, chapter 1, to get the whole chapter in Greek, I don't think there will be very few differences in the Greek text. So you can follow along as he reads it. And I would recommend that you just do it more than once and get used to pronouncing Greek words. Read out loud as much as possible. The more you read out loud, the easier it will be simply to read the text in the future for you. I want to go back to my original presentation. Here, I just showed you the YouTube video. I didn't try to play it, but this is the text that he is pronouncing, and he'll read it something like this: in arche ein ho logos, kai ho logos ein pros ton theon, kai theos ein ho logos. Hutos, notice the hard breathing at the beginning of verse 2. Hutos, this one, it means, hutos ein en arche pros ton theon. And did you notice the difference in pronunciation between ein and en, eta and epsilon? Again, verse 2, hutos ein in arche pros ton theon. Panta, verse 3, di autou egeneto, kai choris autou egeneto, ude hen ho gegonen. Now, I just placed the period, you'll notice, at the end of verse 3, where I think, and many scholars think, it belongs. And verse 4 begins a new sentence. You notice our text doesn't punctuate it that way. So right away, we see that we don't have the original manuscripts, and sometimes there's a difference in interpretation, even where the punctuation marks would have gone. I won't read any further here. I'll let you listen to it and then pronounce it along with the reader online. Some folks might want to know what are those words at the bottom of the text. This has only verses 1 to 5, and I'll just say that those are variants in the process of copying over the centuries. Some few variants have come in, and the manuscripts where the various manuscripts are found are listed there. Some of them by symbol, like P75C or D. These are manuscripts kept in particular places, and at the beginning of your Greek New Testament, it may tell you which manuscript is kept in what city and what institution, maybe in the British Museum or different places. There's a B in parentheses in the front, right at the beginning here. If you can see my mouse, I'm not sure you can. There's a B. That means that the editors of the text are fairly certain that they've gotten the text right. But actually, this is the question: which one has the period after hen, and which texts have the period after gegonen in verse 3. So there are some differences on where what the text, slight differences, what the text should be. But remember, 99.9% of the New Testament is clear. There are just a very few places where, in the process of copying over the centuries, some different versions have come in. All right, we will move from this to our next part, which we'll consider in this section. What is a noun? And if you read in the textbook, in chapter 3, I'm actually remember combining chapter 3 and chapter 2. A noun is a word that is the name of something. That's what McIver writes at the beginning. It's on page 50 of your textbook at the bottom, chapter 3.1.1. What is a noun? It is a word that is the name of something. That is Dr. McIver's definition, and it's a very good one, a very simple one. There are common or concrete nouns. Different grammarians have different names or descriptions for different classifications, like lake or sheep or things that are concrete, not ideas, in other words, but animals, places, things that you can feel, pick up, see, common or concrete. They're what we call collective nouns. People is actually a singular word. And in the English, you can have people, and in Greek, you can have people, but you can also have peoples, sometimes referred to as a people group. So you have to remember that people can be collective. Actually, sheep is a collective word too, or can be. It can refer to more than one sheep. Because the plural of sheep is not sheeps, but simply sheep. English language is not easy to learn either, is it? Those of you from South Asia will know what I'm talking about. Abstract nouns, we call them, like love, hope, righteousness. These are words that describe more ideas, concepts, than something concrete like a book. This is I'm touching a book, I'm touching a laptop, but you can't quite touch hope and love and righteousness. They're very real, but they're not substantive, we say. Nouns like light can be more than one category, because you can turn on the light and that is a tangible, concrete thing, or it can also be figurative. All of a sudden I saw the light. In other words, all of a sudden I understood what someone was saying, for example. Proper nouns or proper names are like we have in the vocabulary list in chapter 1. Those are the names of places and people. And we usually capitalize those, often in the Greek New Testament. Not always, but often. Short definitions of nouns and other words are called glosses. So we have definitions, but we also have glosses. I'm going to make a distinction, and it's important that we do, because a definition usually or needs to incorporate, or at least bear in mind, that a word can have many different glosses, many different simple definitions. A word can be used in many different ways. The word logos in Greek is translated word in John 1:1, and it means a word. It can mean also, though, a message. It can mean a matter. It can mean an event. It's a very versatile word. It can be used in different ways. So it has many different glosses. And what you will find is that in the textbook, Dr. McIver gives a gloss each time for each vocabulary word that we learn. But he usually only gives one, maybe two. This will be the most commonly used gloss in order for us to remember that word by. But we need to remember that there can be more than one. And sometimes we almost need a sentence to define what a word means because, well, we don't have the exact equivalent in English. We'll need to say a lot more about the meanings of words and definitions, but we'll do that later. You might ask, where do I find a gloss for a Greek word? And the answer is really, you should eventually own a Greek lexicon. In McIver, each chapter, as I mentioned, sometimes part of a chapter ends with a vocabulary list. I will use the abbreviation V. So if I have V1, then I mean the vocabulary list of words that is on page 36. It will be at the end of a chapter, sometimes a section. And if you see V, you know, he means vocabulary list and then the number of the chapter or the number of the section. Could be V 12.1, that would be section 12.1 in chapter 12. You should eventually own a Greek lexicon. And don't ask me why it's not called a dictionary, because I don't know. We just call it a lexicon. I guess we need something fancy for old ancient languages. If you find out why it's called a lexicon, let me know, because I'm very interested. I haven't researched it really. A good place to start is the Barclay-Newman lexicon, and it was recently revised by Mr. Barclay-Newman. I'm thinking that he is an older man now, because I first acquired his little dictionary 50 years ago, and I got it for $1. It costs much more than that now from the Bible Society. Those of you in South Asia, though, will get a special price if you come to me, because I'm the point man for FC College Pakistan Bibles that come from the Pakistan Bible Society, and for which in scholarly works like the Greek New Testament or Greek lexicon that they publish, the German Bible Society owns the copyright. So it's actually United Bible Societies, but the Bible Society in Pakistan sells these volumes at a much cheaper price than they would be available in the West. So, for example, you can get this new edition, and it's very much enlarged from the edition before it. So if you have an old one, I suggest you get the new one. It costs 600 rupees, which is something around $5, which is a very good price for this. And it's a good place to start. You should own this, and if you stick with us in the course, you'll actually get another one in the process of time. I won't give you this one, but I think some things you need to save up and purchase yourself. But I will give you what's called Kubo, and I'll talk about him later. The next step would be for a Westerner or also for South Asian students, Bill Mounce's Complete Expository Dictionary. I wish it were complete. That's not quite true. It's not complete. He still needs to include several words. For example, I just looked up the word friend. You look up the English word in Dr. Mounce's expository dictionary, And he gives one Hebrew word for friend, and he gives one one New Testament word for friend, one Greek word. But actually, there's more than just one, especially in New Testament Greek, of translated friend. And I would go over the differences, but I think I will save that for later. So I'm going to skip those slides. And I want to talk now about verbs. We've talked about nouns. I want to talk about verbs in this section. Verb describes for us what is happening, or as McIver says at the beginning of chapter 2. You'll notice that actually that I've moved back now to chapter 2. So you may want to drop back from page 50, where we were just looking at nouns, to page 43. What is a verb and how do we recognize it? How do we know what Greek verbs look like? I'm going to back up a little bit further than that and tell us that Greek verbs have these things. They have mood, and there are different kinds of mood. This first semester, we're only going to be learning the indicative. Those of you who are in the church course, we will touch on a few other moods because we're doing a short course. But in FC College, at FC College, we will this semester only look at the indicative mood, which is the mood of fact. We're stating a fact. We may be asking a question, but it's still concrete. When we get to possibilities, then we will move into other moods or infinitives and things like that. Tense usually has something to do with time, but actually in Greek there is something that's more important than time. They didn't have watches, maybe, I'm not sure for the reason, but for right now, we'll just simply say the kind of action is more important for the Greek reader and writer than the time. Now, there is a way of showing time in Greek, and I'll mention it in just a second. But the main thing about the Greek verb tenses, we will call them tenses, is that they show three different types, basically, and I would call them, for the sake of simplicity, video, photo, and photo album. So what do I mean by video, photo, and photo album? What I mean is that the present tense, for example, and also the imperfect, tend to show action as it is happening or as it was happening. The action is generally a process, not always. There are exceptions. So it's like a video, like something happening in front of you, and you maybe even you're drawn into the story watching it occur. Whereas the aorist tense is often the past tense, time-wise, but not necessarily. It is, though, usually looking at the action as though it has occurred or looking at the action as a whole. I went to town. Now, it is in the past, but for the Greek, I went to town is primarily describing an event that's completed. That's the main thing about it. Not that it's past time so much as the kind of action. Is it the action continuing, or has the action, is looking at the whole action as a whole? And then there's what I call photo album, which is a kind of mixture between the two. Something has happened and the results are with us. And this tense, which is the perfect tense usually, is looking at or concentrating on the results. What happened and what are the results of what happened? I have a bad stomach, meaning I ate something and I have the consequences now. I ate something bad and my stomach didn't take it. I have decided. That's different from I decided. I decided in Greek would be aorist tense, um, past, but looking at it as a whole action. Whereas I have decided is more leaning on the fact that I made a decision and the results of the decision have now been are now evident. So it concentrates on the results rather than the action. So that's why I call it a photo album. It's like looking through a photo album, the results of a trip that you had. You took a trip, but now the results are shown in the photo album. A verb also has voice, and for right now, we're only going to be learning the active voice, where the subject is acting, but they will also find a passive voice, the subject is acted upon, and Greek also still has, at this time, a middle voice, which we will explain later. Every verb is part of a paradigm and has a stem as far as the grammatical part is concerned. Um, in fact, if you think of a verb in terms of augment, stem, and ending, it will help you to learn how a Greek verb is expressed. Now, we're not going to be learning any augments for quite a while. The augment is actually a prefix, but in Greek grammar, we call it an augment. It's usually epsilon, and it's put in front of the verb, and it throws it into past time. It actually makes us think of an action in the past. But if I take the verb luo, I need to understand that omega is the ending of the verb. Lu is the stem of the verb. And it'll come more plain to you if you take the vocabulary list on page in chapter 2 on page 40. Let me see, I have my book in front of me here. On page 47, vocabulary 2, or we would also call it V2. If you look at that list, you'll see a list of verbs, actually very common verbs that are used in the New Testament. And the stem for one of them that is very commonly used to show endings is lu. It means loose. Maybe we got the English word loose from lu. I don't know. But if you combine these verbs in chapter on page 47 with the verb paradigm of the present indicative active on page 44, section 2.3, you will see luo. If you look at the table on page 44, section 2.3, the middle form of luo. Luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, luusin. This table gives us the endings of the present indicative active. Indicative, we don't have to worry about too much because everything we learn, every verb we learn is going to be in the indicative mood right now. But active voice is important. The subject is doing the acting. And if you look on the right, the English meaning of luo is I loose. The English meaning of lues, you loose. You singular, by the way. Greek has different forms for the singular you and the plural you, not like English. We differentiate, and that's helpful in the New Testament. So I loose, you loose, he, she, it looses. And if you look on the left column in section 2.3 on the table, the bottom of page 44, a first person singular, we call it, second person singular, third person singular. There are always 6 forms of any Greek paradigm because we have 6 persons. I, you, he, she, it. we, you plural, and they. Those are the six parts or persons of the verb paradigm. I'm going to combine this with, sorry, I seem to have skipped. I'm going to combine all of our, or some of our verbs, most of our verbs from V2, from the vocabulary list at the end of chapter 2, with these endings. So I'm going to, instead of having luo, lues, lue, luomen, we're going to have luo, akues, lambane, esthiomen, echete, heuriscus in. You notice I've taken 6 of those verbs, most of them, and put the endings of the present indicative active with them. What you need to do is memorize the endings, especially o, es, e, omen, ete, use, or usin. If the next word starts with a vowel, then there's what we call a movable nu. After use, then becomes usen. So if the next word starts with a consonant like sigma or lambda, then there won't be a nu. But if the next word starts with alpha or epsilon or some other vowel, then there will be a nu. We call it the movable nu. Luo, lues, lue, luomen, luete, luusen, but with our verbs here, different verbs, luo, akues, lambane, esthiomen, echete, heuriscusin. Now, if I want to understand what I just wrote, I need to realize that each ending tells me which person is acting. Luo, I am loosing. And you notice that when I translate the present tense in Greek into English, I'm going to use the progressive form. I am loosing, not the simple present, I loose. Why I do that, I will explain later, because I think it's more helpful to get it into our minds. But I'm going to, instead of using the simple present as he does in the textbook, I'm using the progressive. So I am losing, not I lose. Although it's not wrong. If you translate I lose, that's fine. But again, I am losing a process. If I have akues, then I need to know, first of all, the vocabulary word. It's very important that I memorize all the vocabulary words. Aku, and ace is the ending for the second person singular. So aku ace, you are hearing. Lamban is the stem of lambano. But if I add a, lamban a, then he, she, it is receiving. Which one, he, she, or it, depends on the context. Usually it will be clear. If it is mater, mother, then it is she is receiving. And if it's aner, a man, then he is receiving, and so on. Esthiomen, we are eating. Echete, you are having. Heuriscusen, they are finding. Now, that is where we're going to end this session. You need to do 2 things. You need to learn the vocabulary lists at the end of chapter 2. Actually, you need to do more things. You need to learn the vocabulary list at the end of chapter 2 and in chapter 3. But you also need to learn the present tense endings, o, es, e, omen, ete, usi. And in Greek, the way that we know which pronoun, which person is acting is by the ending of the verb. Now, we will pick this up at this point later.